News channel here in Kukumlemle. We're also live on Joy 99.7 FM, also on Love 99.5 FM in Kumasi, myjoyonline.com, all our social media platforms, also on YouTube, DSTV channel 421, GoTV channel 144, also on Joy Prime. And it's an edition that we are starting today, hoping to get answers or closure to issues that happened in 2021 that you wanted answers for, that maybe you did not get or was not satisfied with the answers that you got. 2022 has also started, and we're hoping that you will get answers to certain things that you're expecting to happen. It's happening tonight here on The Probe as the Information Minister, Kojo Oppong-Nkrumah, joins us live from Studio 995 all the way in Kumasi, is the Love FM studios. I'll be right back, then we get talking. A number of your questions and that you've sent in, loads and loads of them. Hopefully, we'll get to go through it. But if you haven't sent them already, you can also join us with your questions, comments, suggestions via WhatsApp, also on all our social media platforms. You can leave it there. I am MFA Paul. Good evening once again and welcome to The Pro. I'll be right back. Please stay with me.
Alexa, open Multimedia Ghana and play Joy FM.
Super Hits Radio, Joy 99.7.
Listen to Joy FM, Hits FM, Love FM, live on your Amazon Echo. Listen to your favorite multimedia radio stations live on your Amazon Echo device by saying, Alexa, open Multimedia Ghana, play Joy FM or Hits FM or Love FM. Or catch up on your favorite podcast by saying, Alexa, play, and then the name of your favorite podcast from Multimedia Ghana. For a list of all podcasts available, say Alexa. Ask Multimedia Ghana to browse programs. Alexa, welcome to Multimedia.
My name is David Max Fuga. I'm the General Manager in charge of sales and customer service here in Multimedia. When we began the year 2021, we knew that coming from the first wave of COVID-19, our journey was going to be long and difficult. However, you, our advertisers, our clients, our business partners, made it less intense than we projected. We thank you. We are grateful for accepting us to be part of your advertising and marketing solutions in 2021. Indeed, we thank you for your trust and loyalty. You are the heart and soul of what we do here in Multimedia. Simply put, without you, there'll be no Multimedia. As we come to the end of the year, on behalf of my team, on behalf of the management and staff of Multimedia, we wish you a very Merry Christmas and a prosperous New Year. May your business grow stronger, better, and more profitable in the year 2022. Imama Afishapa, Apoye Yinami.
This season of giving, sharing, and gratitude, we pause to appreciate you, the special people who made our journey joyful. We say a big thank you Yedamwase. Nye Yuwaladun. Akbenami.
Nagodi. Barka.
From all of us here at the Multimedia Group and our families to your families, grateful hearts. Aseda, Christ at work.
Welcome back and many thanks for your company here on The Probe tonight. Like I said, Information Minister Kojo Oppong-Nkrumah is my guest. And guess what? He's joining us live from Kumasi Studio 995, Love FM Studios, we call it. Welcome, sir. Thank you very much for your time here on The Probe tonight.
Thanks for having me, MFA.
Great. And the people of Kumasi are asking what your mission is in the region.
Well, I'm in Kumasi as part of preparatory efforts for the Media Capacity Enhancement Program, which comes off tomorrow morning at the Menchia Palace. Stakeholders in the media industry, the Ghana Independent Broadcasters Association, the Ghana Journalists Association, the Ghana Institute of Journalism, PRIMPAG, and other related groups came together under the auspices of the Ministry of Information with the objective of trying to deal with one major challenge, which is the challenge of capacity enhancement in the industry. A lot of our colleagues who practice demonstrate very respectable capacity on the job on a daily basis, but continuously ask for support to enhance their capacities. And we all know as practitioners that it is how much capacity you have, how much command you have over the subject matter that assists your ability to deliver on it. And so we encouraged them to do a skills gap analysis, develop curriculum for training practicing journalists, and roll out a program to train practicing journalists. Thankfully, when they did that and brought us the bill, the Ministry of Information and Partners could underwrite scholarships for 250 practicing journalists a year. And so tomorrow, what is starting here in Kumasi is that the first cohort of the 250 journalists for the year 2020 who are to benefit from the Media Capacity Enhancement Program are commencing the training program. Otumfuo Setutu Asantehene will chair the opening at the Menchia Palace. And so myself and a lot of the stakeholders in the media industry are here, as well as the faculty are here to prepare for tomorrow morning.
I think my manners, though, this is our very first encounter. Oh, is it? We haven't wished you a Happy New Year just yet. And Happy New Year to you once again. And we'll talk more about this media capacity building tomorrow and subsequently. Well. But there are a lot of issues that we need clarity to. There are a number of questions that people have sent in. We'll get through to it right now, but I would first want to find out this benchmark policy. There was a communication from industry players that government has since suspended it, amongst others. Is there clarity really on it? What exactly is the situation with this benchmark policy?
The brief as I have it is that it is one of the policies aimed at stimulating local production here in Ghana and our domestic resource mobilization efforts. It's already been approved by Parliament, and government intends to go ahead with it. But we get a lot of feedback and questions and suggestions from importers in particular. And I think the decision has been made to halt its implementation temporarily and afford some more room for engagement so that there'll be some better understanding and clarity before full rollout commences, I think somewhere on the 17th of January.
Sure, it's been suspended for further engagements.
That's the understanding I have.
Okay, well, and I'm sure you may have noticed before you headed to Kumasi, for instance, the number of queues and issues about this SIM card registration. There have been concerns about why these long queues. Is there no other way around it than what we see, especially in a fourth wave?
On how they can ensure that the exercise is smoother. And it's the expectation that as implementation commences on this new approach that is being rolled out by the MNOs, the situation should be a lot easier for our brothers and sisters who seek to comply with the policy directive to have their access registered.
Okay. Well, so with clarity to these issues, before we get into the questions, last year ended a bit on a rough note, knowing what happened in Parliament, for instance. I've seen people asking me to ask you what exactly your thoughts are on how Parliament ended its sitting or meeting last year.
I think it's obvious to every observer that though we have a near-hung parliament, 138, 137, Parliament generally conducted the majority of its business very well. And the Speaker of Parliament, who is from the NDC stock, generally, until the very final days where some of his decisions were worrisome to us, also, held his own pretty well. It was in the last, I think, 1 month or so during the budget processes that a string of decisions made by the Speaker, per curiam, led to some chaos in the House. I am not sure that we have come to a common page on how to move forward yet, but it is our expectation that when Parliament resumes, I think around the 25th of January, and leadership reconvenes, we'll be able to navigate these very challenging contours for our democracy.
If you had to describe happenings of the last meeting with one word, what would it be?
I would have to find that word. I don't have it yet.
Interesting. Well, let's get into the first batch of questions, Mr. Opoku-Nkrumah. The few times that he doesn't have a word. That's interesting. So if we are ready, let's get into the first batch. We'll start from Facebook. Safo says, where are we currently with the Agenda 111? It's been a long time since the president cut short for construction to start, with each to be completed in 18 months. Are these projects nearing completion? Is the question. Asante says, does government think it could have handled and related to fix the country movement in a better way? That's the next question, Asante. Delali is asking, the matter of procuring a presidential jet, is that an official government position? And how much will that cost the state? Delali is asking. Maybe we'll take one more, then we can get answers. Ilyas says, UTAG is beginning a strike tomorrow. Teo declared one last week. Same for anesthetists. The year could shape up to become full of industrial agitations. Is there a plan? So that's the first batch of questions that we have. Maybe we'll take it from Ilyasu because the year started on that note, a number of industrial actions. Is there a plan? He asks.
Well, I mean, there is a whole ministry that is responsible for managing the relationship between the public employer as a government and the various labor unions, and is mandated to assist the specific ministries that deal with these labor unions in their relationship with these unions. It is always a demand and supply question in the first place, and a question also of sentiments of people in the public space. So you notice that a lot of our colleagues, whether it's in teaching or in some other labor areas, are agitating or are demanding more. You always have to ask yourself from the supply side, how much supply is there to adequately respond to this? And it is within that framework that this conversation continues to go on between whether it's Education Ministry or other related ministries, and the labor unions with the Employment Ministry at the table. At the moment, I think it's still work in progress. Some industrial actions have been announced. There are rules that govern the conditions under which you can announce industrial action, whether you can use industrial action as a bargaining chip at the table or not, or whether you have to exhaust the processes. My understanding is that the Employment Minister and his associates are very much on top of it and are assisting the frontline ministries like education, etc., to try and find that fine balance between demand and supply. And our hope is that they will be successful sooner than later. But I think the reality also is that usually when a government is done with its first term, you see a lot of attempts to whip up labor angst from various parts of the body politic. Our hope is that that is not what is happening in this instance, and that the legitimate concerns that are being raised by these labor unions can be addressed as soon as possible.
Do we get a sense that a floodgate of a sort has been opened on the labor front for these agitations?
If that would be the case, it will certainly not be on the part of government. But it is important for all of us to come to a certain point of understanding that it's a demand and supply question. Where are we as a country in terms of supply? It will take us to one of the questions that I'm very sure will come up. Because as I followed your social media thread, I've seen a lot of questions pop up on revenue mobilization and e-levy, etc. And it's one thing I always talk to you and our colleagues about. That's the supply side. So as we demand, we also have to look at the supply side. And it is when we're able to match the two that some equilibrium will be brought to bear.
Okay. Well, there's a question also about the Agenda 111. We started off the year last year with it, and it's been a long time since the president cut the sword. That's SAFO's concern. Are these projects nearing completion? What exactly is the status of these 111 hospitals that were supposed to be built?
So let's go back to the basics. I think sometimes people forget some of the key things and cast new narratives that take us from what has been promised. Government has an Agenda 111 made up of about 92 or 93 district hospitals, initially 88, now moved to about 93 if I'm correct. And then there are regional and specialist hospitals, including psychiatric hospitals. And work for the first group, which is the district hospitals, about 93 of them, is what we have tackled. Now, we mentioned very clearly from the beginning that we expect that when any project is commenced, within about 18 months after commencement, it should be completed. We have not said that from the day the president started, all 93 or so will be completed in 18 months. And it's very important that we go back to the initial communication and get the Ghanaian public to understand and to be reminded of what has been said. So what has been said is that from commencement, within 18 months of every project when it is commenced, we expect some completion. That's the first point. The second point is that, so Trede, for example, was where we had the commencement of works. Beyond Trede, a number of contractors have also received their mobilization and are expected to get onto the ground and to commence works, and the clock starts counting thereon. My understanding is that I think in the first week of February, we expect to have the Agenda 111 Implementation Committee formally update the country that so far work has commenced on X number of projects. And by March, the very first tour across these projects, at least the first, I think 30 or so, where actual commencement has started, is expected to take place even as commencement starts for others. So it's something that the administration is very committed to and is rolling it out in bits and pieces even as we speak currently.
But as it stands now, we are not aware how many exactly have started and at which stage they are.
Yeah, and as I explained, in the first week of February, our expectation is that somewhere around the first 2 weeks of February, the implementation committee will be updating on these numbers as you are requiring. We're almost there.
Okay. Well, Asante is asking, does government think it could have handled and related to fix the country movement in a better way? This was a key issue also that happened in 2021.
I don't know if there are any specifics that people are of the view were not handled well. If there are, we can look at those specifics.
Okay, Asante, that's the response to you. But at least we also the media engagement, the issues that were raised by the Fix the Country demonstrators, for instance. They had concerns about the situation in this country, economic hardships, among others. The engagement from government and those who were leading this public agitations. For him,
I mean,
I'm sure
right
that's
from
what
the
he's
very
asking.
beginning,
Did you relate to them
delegation of ministers met the conveners of this platform and expressed government's willingness to continuously engage with them. I was tasked and I delivered on leading engagements between, for example, the minister responsible for finance and the entire country through the press at the finance ministry to respond to the questions of how are we getting the Ghanaian economy on track, especially after COVID. And even from there, the minister has held several engagements updating on how we are getting this economy back on track. We've rolled out a full program, the Ghana Cares of Atampa program. The results are coming. You are seeing the numbers in growth. You are seeing the numbers in jobs that are gradually coming up. It's not perfect yet, but I think that is clarity in terms of response on the economy. Take roads. We've had the opportunity to have the roads minister front and center update the country on the roads projects that have been delivered, are being delivered, are on the cards to be delivered. And in the last, I think, 1 month, if you've watched many of the government social media platforms and the government communication teams' platforms, we have been pushing, including the president and vice president's platforms, we've been pushing updates on what is happening in terms of roads. There will be many roads out there that will still be calling for attention, yes, admittedly. But you would find that a lot has been done, is being done during this process. So in terms of responses to some of the issues that were raised as part of this conversation, that some specific things should be fixed, we're of the view that we have engaged frontally, responsibly, honestly with the conveners and with the Ghanaian people. If there are any matters still outstanding that there's a view can be better handled, I'm happy to hear them and respond to them.
It was a year of roads, since we've been talking about it, a year of roads in 2021. How much of these roads were we able to complete?
Well, I'm sure the next time we put the roads minister up on the platform, he would provide the latest update. You recall the last time he was with us at the at the Ministry of Information, he provided a full detail with photos and videos and data on the extent of roads that have been done so far and work in progress so far. Roads, bridges, overpasses, etc. He's scheduled to be with us, I think, by the end of March, by the end of Q1, and he'll be able to provide the latest updates. Before then, the last update since his press briefing was also made available in the 2022 budget with all of the details. So I'm sure next time he joins us, he can give us the latest numbers.
Okay. Well, there were a number of demonstrations also about roads, still on roads. And we heard the minister, for instance, mention that demonstrations will not, force government to, fix roads. Is that a view shared by government?
I think what the minister sought to say was that the resource framework to deal with the roads does not lie necessarily in agitations without more. We need to have a broader conversation about what does it take to fix our roads. So the conversation should not be simplified to why have you not fixed my road or when are you fixing my road? The conversation should be expanded to what does it take to fix our roads? And when we open up that conversation that way, one of the first things we'll realize is that it takes a lot of resources to fix our roads, resources that we have to confront and mobilize to be able to deliver on this. And that would take us into the ambit of domestic revenue mobilization. I mean, for currently, though our compatriots are doing about 25 to 30% of GDP, i.e., the GDP that is generated in the economy, 25 to 30% of it is what comes back to government. For government to use to fix their roads, we in Ghana are doing somewhere around 12%. Is that adequate? Can we have a conversation about what it takes to improve domestic resource mobilization so that the person who is responsible for fixing our roads can get more resources and use those resources to deliver on these roads? Currently, many contractors around the country have been given contracts, are on roads, but the reality is that very often when IPCs are ready, the resource requirement to settle their obligations is not adequate. And so it is not just a conversation about when are you fixing my roads, fix my roads or I'll burn a tie. It is a conversation about what does it take to fix our roads and how can we share that responsibility together.
Well, Delali is asking the matter of procuring a presidential jet. Is that an official government position and how much will that cost the state? Closely linked to that, I see a message also from Kodie, and he's asking why is the cost of the president's recent travels to Europe, particularly relating to the rental of jets, a national security matter? Akufo-Addo promised to be accountable. Why can't Ghanaians know how much it costs? Maybe we could tie both in and talk about the presidential jets.
So I would reiterate what the minister responsible for defense told Parliament. And he was quite clear that he has received a request from the Ghana Air Force to procure an executive carrier. And he was even clear on that day that it is not a presidential jet, it's an executive carrier that he has received a request for. He and his advisors would have to first consider that request and make a determination whether or not that request is a request that, within the context of the various needs of this country, resource constraints, is something that he and his advisors are comfortable with. When he is done, he will, if he is convinced, then appear before Cabinet and seek to make a case for it at Cabinet. And he will need to mobilize the support of other colleague Cabinet ministers to advise the president. Cabinet, if you check the Constitution, it's an advisory body to the president, to advise the president. And if the president is convinced and a transaction of that nature is approved, then we'll have to proceed to Parliament to request Parliament to approve a financing agreement and a commercial agreement for such purposes. As at now, none of those processes has been completed. What I do understand has happened, what the minister explained to Parliament is that he has only received a request from the Ghana Air Force, which request is being considered by his ministry. Whatever decision is made by his ministry, he will then inform the necessary parties of it.
But just for clarity, what's the difference between an executive carrier and a presidential jet?
So, for example, in America, they have the Air Force One, which is the presidential jet. It carries the president. And then I think sometimes the vice president. And no other persons are necessarily given access to that. The Ghana Air Force also operates an executive carrier service for executives, Speaker of Parliament, ministers of state, VVIPs, other heads of state that for some reason or the other may have to be brought into the Ghanaian jurisdiction. For that, they have an executive, or they sometimes have an executive carrier, which is used for that purpose. Sometimes it can be reconfigured depending on the needs or whatever needs to be flown across. The understanding we have is that that is what they have requested for, not an aircraft for the exclusive use of the president, which is what is known as a presidential jet. But even that request they have made is a request that is now being considered by the Defense Ministry. And when they do come to a conclusion on it, whether they agree with the request or disagree with the request, I'm sure we will be informed accordingly.
And the Air Force has no idea what the financial implications will be. I'm sure before they put that forward, there will be some, monetary...
I'm not privy to what ideas they have or they do not have. But all of that will be matters of consideration at the Ministry of Defense. And when they come to a view, I'm sure it will not be a secret matter. If they come to the view that it is not a request they can support, I'm sure we'll be made aware of it. If they come to the view that it is a request they can support, I'm sure they will make us aware of that.
And talk of secret matters. We've heard the issues about the president's travel relating to rental of jets, amongst others, as being described as a national security matter. The concern for Kodia is that the President Akufo-Addo promised to be accountable. Why can't Ghanaians know how much it is costing him to rent a presidential jet or to travel to Europe, for instance, especially when it's become a matter of controversy?
Again, my understanding... Yeah, go ahead.
I'm done with that.
Well, again, my understanding is that the Minister for National Security explained to Parliament the reasons for which the specific cost items expended out of the operational funds of the National Security Ministry could not be outlined before the plenary in Parliament. Parliament, I don't recall, challenged that. I don't recall Parliament challenged that because that has been the practice, I think, in this republic for a while now. Obviously, not everybody will agree with that, and I'm sure the questioner does not agree with that. But that is the position that the National Security Minister expressed, and Parliament did not disagree with that view.
Okay, let's take the next batch of questions at this point. And we've been talking about e-levy. I see that there are a number of questions there. We're ready. Let's take the next batch of questions. This one from Kweku. Some public sector workers have kicked against a 7% raise for public sector workers. Is it fair that those of you in the political class get such huge salaries, but other public sector workers get less? That's Kweku's message. On WhatsApp, Ajiman says, what is the impact of the current jostling for NPP national offices as well as the flag bearership race having on government business in this new year and the battles heating up? How will government deal with it? Ajiman is asking. Genesis says, there's at least one NPP MP sponsoring the anti-LGBTQ bill. He's also a deputy minister. What is government's position on the current bill before Parliament? And there's one also from Aseye, I'm sure not really available on the screen. It says, is the e-levy still on the table? And what is government's strategy with Parliament set to return in 2 weeks? Maybe we'll start with Aseye's question. Issues about e-levy. I see tons and tons of them. We'll go through.
Yeah, I saw a lot of questions on e-levy when I went through comments under your initial post. The e-levy is still on the table. It is a matter that the executive believes is key to revenue mobilization to help deal with all the demands, the very legitimate demands that the people of Ghana are making. You see, the first point is that the demands on government will not go down. They will actually be going up. Because as information dissemination goes up, as citizens are empowered, everybody is demanding something in their community. Since I came to Kumasi, and as I've been around for a while, people are demanding various things. There are only 3 ways of satisfying all of those things that are being demanded. You either wait for somebody to gift it to you, or you borrow for it, or you pay for it. Only 3 ways. Now today, because of donor fatigue, global economic hardships, COVID as well, you are not necessarily going to get a lot of gifts from around the world to respond to the needs of people. That's number 1. Number 2, today, especially because of COVID and the kind of borrowing that economies around the world and Ghana have had to do because of COVID, you are almost at the point where you cannot borrow so much to respond to these very legitimate needs of the Ghanaians: roads, schools, hospitals, jobs. You can't borrow your way out of those. So the third and only option that remains is the revenue mobilization effort. So the e-levy remains an instrumental part of the fiscal framework for 2022, and it's still on the table. It is okay that some persons have contrary views. In a democracy, you don't expect 100% of views to congregate in one way. In fact, if all of us thought the same way, this probably won't be a democracy. So it's okay that not everybody agrees to the methods that we intend to employ to raise revenue. What is important is that we handle that disagreement in a civil, mature, courteous manner. that disagreement ought not to degenerate into blows and using of harmful implements to attack one another. That's not a civilized democracy. And so these disagreements have to be resolved by the force of reason and thought and argument and by a vote. That's how Parliament conducts its business. So our expectation is that when Parliament resumes and Mr. Speaker is in the chair, and that is very important because this is a peculiar Parliament, the Speaker needs to be in the chair so that we can go through the process of considering the e-levy and take a decision on it at the end of the day and raise those revenues to deliver on the very legitimate concerns that the labor groups that you just mentioned are agitating, the very legitimate concerns they are raising. You need resources to be able to respond to those. You need resources to respond to the question of roads. You need resources to respond to the question of factories and jobs all over the place. So our expectation is that when Parliament resumes, we'll have an opportunity to go through the debate, try to convince one another, and in the end put it to a vote and handle it in a very civilized manner like all the mature democracies do.
But do we get a sense that government is trying to make us understand that without this particular e-levy, nothing is going to happen in terms of our roads being fixed, amongst others? Is this the be it and end it all to our situation as a country?
No, I don't think anybody in government has said that. Nobody in government has said that without e-levy, we can't. I mean, quite recently, I heard one of our colleagues on the NDC side try to create an impression that government says that e-levy is the solution to all our problems. Government hasn't said that. All revenue handles, the 145 billion Ghana cedis that has been appropriated, it is made up of a mix of revenue and debt. So every one of those handles must come in for us to deliver on the program. MFA, the budget of Ghana for the year 2022 is 145 billion. My analysis, when I run the analysis, we should probably be doing about 200 to 250 billion. A lot of the noise and commentary in town is money, but 250 billion can deal with all of these. The problem is that you are only able to raise, people are paying only about 60, 70 billion. And then you have to borrow and add to that, and then come to a point where you can afford to spend only 145 billion. If you are going to bring your deficit down to about 7.5, 7.9, we've spoken about in this year. So if you are going to get to that 200, 250 billion, that really pushes the envelope. We have to mobilize domestic resources. And we have to be straight about that with everybody. It is the resources that will help us to deliver on everything. I'm in Kumasi. The Ashanti people have a proverb. They say, "Kwan chaya deefe, nansu ye diska eneye."
How then do you respond to Kojo, your namesake, who says it appears as the mismanagement of the economy that is pushing government to impose this particular e-levy?
That obviously cannot be true. When you have a country that is mobilizing only 12% of GDP, that is not about mismanagement. That is about inadequacy of domestic resource mobilization. If you were mobilizing about, 25, 30%, which is the rule of thumb in OECD countries around us by now, and you were still not able to deliver on labor agitations or all of the things that people are demanding, then you can get into the realm of mismanagement. The real challenge is that our resources are not enough. But that said, there's also some truth in the fact that there needs to be some more efficiency in utilizing even the 12%, no doubt about it. And that is why I think you have seen clearly government efforts aimed at reducing some of the expenditure duplications that we have in our system. So take, for example, our whole digitization drive and our whole agenda to, for example, avoid the duplication of databases. EC is doing a biometric database, a few hundreds of millions. NI is doing another one, a few hundreds of millions. You go to some of the other state institutions, NHI is doing one, a few hundreds of millions. This whole exercise to ensure that, for example, not everybody is doing their own database, and you can have one database that can cut across. There are ways of reducing some of the expenses and better utilizing the 12.5% of GDP that we are mobilizing. But even if you managed to save 1%, that becomes what? You are probably getting to 13% of GDP. That is still not enough when you need 25 or 30% of GDP. So yes, there's something to be said about efficiency and cutting out inefficiencies, but there's a bigger question that we need to answer. And that question, it's not about MPP or NDC. If we don't confront that question, any administration in power will struggle to deliver on the real needs of the Ghanaian people simply because the resources are not adequate.
Well, still on e-levy, following the fight in Parliament, since you've been talking about it, what sort of engagements have happened with the minority on this particular e-levy? And whilst at it, has government resorted to witch hunting, for instance? We've seen the recent prosecution of Ato Forson, for instance, the ranking on the Finance Committee in Parliament. So we're talking about the engagements that have happened with the minority since what we saw in Parliament happened, and then whether government has resorted to witch hunting.
I think anybody who says that there has not been engagement on e-levy is just casting a narrative without or is just casting a narrative and refusing to look at the facts on the ground. I mean, e-levy is one of the matters that has been most engaged on, to the extent that the minority leader announced that after he had his engagement with the Minister of Finance and the Minister of State at Finance, he was of the view that 1% will suffice. MF, I'm sure you recall.
I do.
MF, are you there? Hello?
Yes, I'm here. I do recall.
Yeah. So there's been extensive consultation on e-levy. The position that our colleagues in the minority have taken is that they don't want it, that they will not support it. And that is fair. It is fair for them to say that they don't want it, they won't vote for it. But what is not fair is for them to attempt to obstruct the process because they don't support it. I think we must be clear about it. There have been things that we on this side have not been supportive of. And there are things that they will not be supportive of. That's how democracy works. But the fact that you don't support it does not mean you should deliberately obstruct the process. So the conversation about e-levy, I don't think should be reduced to should there be more engagement. All the engagements have taken place. You have heard people give testimony of how they have now been convinced about those engagements. But they have taken a position that they don't support it. And that is fine. But they ought not to obstruct the process simply because they don't support it. If we do that, we'll be degenerating into a society of chaos and lawlessness. That because somebody does not agree with something, then they are going to deliberately obstruct the organs of government from working. And that is not how we want to run our democracy.
And are you resorting to witch hunting? To fish out the key people that are leading it and prosecute them?
I don't think so. I think I saw the... No. I don't think so. I think I saw the Attorney General's department that is handling that particular matter put out a statement explaining the basis on which that matter was put out. As far as I know, we are very committed to having a debate in the Chamber of Parliament and taking a vote on it. And that's how you resolve matters like this.
Okay, so e-levy is still on the table, still at 1.75, 1.5. What exactly will be the reviewed figure, if it will be reviewed at all?
This is at 1.75 after getting the telcos to cut down 25% of their charges.
So it still stays
so
at
that the net impact on the Ghanaian is reduced by 0.25.
Okay. Well, there was a question from Kweku also on some public sector workers having kicked against a 7% raise for public sector workers. We heard the president announce that the Employment and Labour Relations Minister, where you are in Kumasi, that's when the announcement was made. But for them, it's still inadequate, knowing that the political class gets such huge salaries, but other public sector workers get less.
As I mentioned earlier, the question of labor agitations are questions of demand and supply and relativities. And we are hopeful that between the Labour Ministry and the various mother ministries and these labor unions, they'll be able to come to a certain point of understanding.
Well, Ajiman is asking about the impact of current jostling for MPP national offices. There was a message I read earlier, and its impact on government business and how government is dealing with it.
I don't think it's currently impacting government business, but it has the potential to derail government business if not checked. And that is why the president has been very clear, for example, to his ministers, that he wants everybody focused on the job. If he's of the view that you are not focused on the job, he will take the necessary consequential action. The party has backed him up by being very clear that we are not in a campaign period and they will not tolerate individuals seeking to campaign at this time when we are focused on recovering the Ghanaian economy from COVID and its ravages and getting the Ghanaian people a higher quality of life.
Genesis' message also, I'll bring that in quickly. There's at least one NPP MP sponsoring the anti-LGBTQ bill. He's also a deputy minister. He says, what is government's position on the current bill before Parliament? Government has a position?
I mean, I think for anybody who understands parliamentary processes and legislation, he or she will agree with me that it would be inappropriate for the executive to preempt processes that are ongoing in Parliament by stating a position on an outcome which we don't know. If the executive were to state a position, what is our position on? Is it a position on the draft or the position on the amendments that even the promoters of the bill have mentioned that they may seek to procure when it gets on the floor, or is a position on the potential outcome of the bill? So it's a bit inappropriate when it comes to private members' bill for the executive to purport to exact a position on it now. Remember, this is a private members' bill that was occasioned by advocacy for pro-LGBT rights in this republic. We have lived for centuries knowing that there are people around us who have their own LGBT interests. And the Ghanaian society has not been in attack on them or has not sought to legislate against them per se. It is in recent months that the pro-LGBT community started advocacy, opening an office in Accra and seeking to now advocate strongly for it. That you saw civil society groups that are against it galvanize, mobilize, religious groups mobilize, and seek to push this bill, which bill was then presented to some members of parliament at a parliamentary breakfast meeting where the speaker was, and then was subsequently laid by these members of parliament, my colleague Sam George and a few others, on the floor. And it's now going through the processes. I think what we should do is to trust our democracy. That the committee, I'm a member of the committee started public hearings, we are hearing from various sides. The committee will do a good job, bring its report to Parliament as a whole. I'm optimistic that Parliament as a whole will do a decent job on it. And whatever final outcome that Parliament then presents is what the executive can see and have a view on. At this stage, it may be inappropriate for the executive to be proffering views on it.
Okay, I have a number of messages.
On the bill.
Okay, I have a number of messages. I'm hoping that we can run through a few of them just before we go. But speaking of bills, what stage has the broadcasting bill got into? Maxwell is asking, and how does stakeholders contribute to it?
We have a new draft of the broadcasting bill. This draft was developed after we engaged with all stakeholders on the initial draft that I inherited. And so this draft will be subjected to broad stakeholder consultations before we lay it before Parliament. So I'd encourage him to look out through the Ministry of Information platforms when we announce the engagement on this new draft as we have it.
Okay, there's a message from the Northeast region on you promising to equip the Information Services Department to enable its function effectively in this COVID-19 era. He says the department in the various districts are unable to function due to lack of logistics and staff. What has become of that promise? Tanko is asking.
Yeah, we have a $35 million request before Cabinet, seeking to retool all the 261 plus 16 plus 1 offices of the Information Services Department, seeking to provide them with computers connected to the internet, and also seeking to provide them with vans. You go to many of our areas and the vans have broken down and are not functional. we are looking for it, A, to get approval from Cabinet, and B, approval from Parliament, and C, to get the resources. It's a demand and supply thing, as I've been discussing with you. And when we have those resources, we can quickly deliver on that.
NAPCO, I can't count the number of messages I've received regarding NAPCO and the arrears, payments that they have to be paid that hasn't come through. What exactly is the status of these, volunteers or people that went through that program and have still not been paid?
I think it's unfortunate that they have still not received their allowances. I think they have some 2 or 3 months arrears of allowances that they have still not received. But the reason is that you recall the program itself came to an end, that cohort had their tenure coming to an end because it's a 3-year tenure for every cohort. And the initial understanding was that that entire cohort was going to be exited, but an extension has been granted to them. And our expectation is that they would quickly finish the rollover exercise they are doing and do well to pay the allowances that are due these brothers and sisters of ours. We feel the kind of pain that they are going through. We expect that it will be resolved as soon as possible.
But we don't know when exactly they will be paid, is the question they're asking.
I don't have dates as I speak to you right now, but I do know that it is a matter that, for example, the Honorable Charles Edubuahin, the Office of the Vice President, Dr. Anyas of the NAPCO Secretariat are keenly working on to complete this extension and rollover so that they can satisfy their obligations.
I see a number of questions also on education. The plan that we have for education this year, especially the basic level, issues about textbooks have come up. I see my colleague, Kwejo Mensah Brampa of Adum Newsroom, sending a long question also about when will basic schools reopen in the country. GES is yet to come out with dates for school reopening, making parents and guardians confused on how to plan their lives. Amongst others, no official calendar of activities for basic education is out as we speak. Andy is also asking, what exactly is the situation per your understanding?
I honestly don't have a brief on that as I speak to you now. I'll probably have to fetch a brief on the reopening of the calendar and the latest on the textbooks for you subsequently.
Okay. Well, so how about textbooks? Do we know? Because the new curriculum was introduced amongst others, but no textbooks for these teachers.
As I mentioned, I don't have a brief on that. I'll have to fetch it for you subsequently.
Okay. Well, Constance Bejo is saying, when are we going to experience the real economic transformation as a country?
Well, transformation is a process. It's not an event. When you have an economy that dwindles down to about 3.4 growth, as we had by 2016, and begins to pick up to about average 7% from 2017 to 2019, dipped in COVID, and is now back up, hitting average about 7% moving on. What it means is that if your economy is growing at 7% per annum, even for 5 years or for 10 years or for 8 years of the Akufo-Addo administration, you will see transformation by the time you are done at the end. When China was going through their transformation spell, it wasn't a one-day event. But when they were averaging about 8% growth year on year, within about a decade, if you do 8% on the last 8%, on the last 8%, on the last 8%, within about a decade, you see the kind of transformation you would have achieved. So our prayer is that the Ghanaian people continue to keep faith with the average 7% growth, which is obviously way better than 3.4%, and continue to hold on to that average 7% or 8% under the Akufo-Addo or the MPP administration. And over a period, you will bear testimony to that transformation that we have all been looking for.
And finally, what would you say to those who say that this NPP administration is intolerant of views, intolerant of criticism, intolerant of many things, issues about culture of silence, among others? As information minister, what would you say to them?
Well, I've been here for the last 1 hour responding to questions from Ghanaians. I believe that you cannot say that I or my colleagues are intolerant. I'll tell you a funny story. Very often the people who complain that maybe we are intolerant, themselves are the people who can't take criticism. And when you question or critique their work even, then they go up, in flames with all sorts of accusations. We're running a democracy. We'll not all agree on, the same things. There will be things that you will criticize that others will agree with you or disagree with you on. There will be things that we will say as government that people will disagree with us or agree with us on. We must be able to take just as we give. But I think for us as an administration, we have shown a lot of openness and willingness to engage with the Ghanaian public to take feedback. You are asking me about benchmark values, the implementation of which has been halted briefly to allow for more engagement. I've been telling you about e-levy related engagements. This is not a mark of an intolerant administration.
Is the health minister back from his leave?
You mean his initial leave he went on?
Precisely.
Yes, he's been back for a very long time.
Okay. Well, the concern is that it doesn't appear that anything came out of this, vaccine probe, the Sputnik V vaccine probe that was undertaken by Parliament. There's still concerns about how this government dealt with that particular issue.
Well, Parliament is a different arm from the executive. Parliament conducted a probe. If there's a view that Parliament has not been conclusive with it, with great respect, Parliament will be the best body to answer to that question. Unfortunately, I speak for the executive only, and the people of Ofuasi Ayobi.
Mr. Okonkoma, we are grateful for your time, and we look forward to that engagement tomorrow. Is there a particular criteria for the media persons that are partaking in this? Briefly, 30 seconds.
No, media persons who are interested applied to the Media Capacity Enhancement Program, which is run by an independent body of industry experts, and they accepted some of those applications. So any media person out there can just go to the website. I think it's mcep.com and register to be part of the next cohort. But we'll provide more information tomorrow.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That's Ghana's Information Minister, Kojo Okonkoma, joining us for tonight's edition of The Probe, all the way from our Love FM studios in Kumasi. I am Emefa Pau. Another edition of The Probe comes your way same time next week. A Walk of Jesus for our radio audience is up next with Pastor Atuakwa hosting Prophet Hehe Meku. Please, you want to stay for that. Have a good evening. Many thanks for your company.
Africa may have been spared the worst of the COVID-19 pandemic if the numbers of cases and deaths are anything to go by. However, its economies have been hard hit. Reduced demand and supply for products and services have forced businesses to either close shop, retrench employees, or reduce their salaries. The pandemic has wiped out millions of jobs and affected livelihoods across sub-Saharan Africa. Unable to meet their living expenses, many people have resorted to borrowing in order to survive the times. So, have you got into debt during the pandemic? How do you get out of debt? And what does it mean for your future? This is The Breakdown, BBC Africa's COVID-19 special program, helping you make sense of the crisis.